chapter of Mary Poppins. And it makes me sad because this is my last video. So I hope you enjoy. And our last chapter, it's called West Wind, Chapter 12. It was the first day of spring. Jane and Michael knew this at once because they heard Mr. Banks singing in his bath, and there was only one day in the year where he did that. They always remembered that particular morning. For one thing, it was the first time they were allowed to come downstairs for breakfast, and for another, Mr. Banks lost his black bag, so that the day began with two extraordinary happenings. "Where's my bag?" said Mr. Banks, turning around and around in the hall like a dog chasing his tail. And everyone else began running around too. Ellen, even Miss Brill, and the children. Even Robertson made a special effort and turned around twice. At last Mr. Banks discovered the bag himself in his study, and he rushed into the hall with it, holding it aloft. "Now," he said, as though he were delivering a sermon, "my bag is always kept in one place, here on the umbrella stand. Who put it in the study?" "Well, you did, my dear, when you took the income tax papers. Goodness me. Income tax papers out of it last night," said Mrs. Banks. Mr. Banks gave her such a hurt look that she wished she had been less tactless and had said she'd put it there herself. "Humph," he said, blowing his nose very hard and taking his overcoat from its peg. He walked to the front door. "Hello," he said more cheerfully. "The parrot tulips are in bud." He went into the garden and sniffed the air. "Wind's in the west, I think." He turned down toward Admiral Boom's house where the telescope swung. "I thought so," he said. "Westerly weather, bright and balmy. I won't take an overcoat." And with that he picked up his bag and his bowler hat and hurried out to the city. "Did you hear what he said?" Michael, grabbing Jane's arm. She nodded. "Wind's in the west," she said slowly. Neither of them said any more, but there was a thought in each of their minds that they wished was not there. They'd forgotten it too soon, however, for everything seemed to be as it always was, and the spring sunlight lit up the house so beautifully that nobody remembered it needed a coat of paint and the new wallpaper. On the contrary, they found all themselves thinking that it was the best house in Cherry Tree Lane. They began for a luncheon. Jane had gone down to dig in the garden with Robertson. She had just sown a row of radish seeds when she heard a great commotion in the nursery, and the sound of hurrying footsteps to the stairs. Presently Michael appeared very red in the face and panting loudly. "Look, Jane, look!" he cried, and he held out his hand. With it lay Mary Poppins' compass, with the disc frantically spinning round the arrow as it trembled in Michael's hand. "The compass," said Jane, and she looked at him questioningly. Michael then burst into tears. "She gave it to me," he wept. "She said I could have it all for myself now. There must be something wrong. What's going to happen? She's never given me anything before." "Perhaps she's only trying to be nice," said Jane to soothe him, but in her heart she felt disturbed, as Michael was. She knew very well that Mary Poppins never wasted time in being nice. And yet, strange to say, during that afternoon, Mary Poppins never said a single cross word. Indeed, she hardly said a word at all. She seemed to be thinking very deeply when they asked questions. She seemed to answer them in a faraway voice. At last Michael could no longer bear it. "Oh, do be cross, Mary Poppins. Do be cross again. It's not like you. I feel so anxious." And indeed his heart felt heavy with the thought that something, he didn't quite know what, was about to happen at number 17 Cherry Tree Lane. "Trouble, trouble, and it'll trouble you," said Mary crossly in her unusual voice. And immediately he felt a little better. "Perhaps it's only a feeling," he said to Jane. "Perhaps everything's all right and I'm just imagining. Don't you think so, Jane?" "Probably," said Jane slowly, but she was thinking hard and her heart felt tight in her body. The wind grew wilder towards the evening and blew in little gusts about the house. It went puffing and whistling down chimneys, slipping in through the cracks under the windows, turning the nursery carpet up at the corners. Mary Poppins gave them their supper and cleared away the things, stacking them neatly and methodically. Then she tidied up the nursery and put the kettle on the hob. "There," she said, glancing around the room to see that everything was all right. She was silent for a minute. Then she put one hand lightly on Michael's head and the other on Jane's shoulder. "Now," she said, "I'm just going to take the shoes down for Robertson to clean. Behave yourselves, please. I'll come back." She went out, shut the door quietly behind her. Suddenly as she went, they both felt as if they had to run after her, but something seemed to stop them. They remained quiet with their elbows on the table, waiting for her to come back. Each was trying to reassure the other without saying anything. "How silly are we?" said Jane. "Everything's all right." But she knew that she said it more to comfort Michael than because she thought it was true. The nursery clock ticked loudly from the mantelpiece. The fire flickered and crackled and slowly died. They sat there at the table waiting. At last Michael said uneasily, "She's been gone a long time, hasn't she?" The wind whistled and cried about the house as if in reply. The clock went on ticking its solemn double note. Suddenly the silence was broken by the sound of the front door shutting with a loud bang. "Michael," said Jane, starting up. "Jane," said Michael with a white, anxious look on his face. They listened. Then they ran quickly to the window and looked out. Down below, just outside the front door, stood Mary Poppins dressed in her coat and hat, with her carpet bag in one hand and her umbrella in the other. The wind was blowing wildly about her, tugging at her skirt, tilting her hat rakishly to one side. But it seemed to Jane and Michael that she didn't mind, for she smiled as though she and the wind understood each other. She paused for a moment on the step and glanced back towards the front door. Then with a quick movement, she opened the umbrella, though it wasn't raining, and thrust it over her head. The wind, with a wild cry, slipped under the umbrella, pushing it upwards, as though trying to force it out of her hand. But she held on tightly, and that, apparently, was what the wind wanted her to do, for presently it lifted the umbrella higher into the air and Mary Poppins from the ground. It carried her lightly so her toes just grazed along the garden path. Then it lifted her over the front gate and swept her upwards towards the branches of the cherry trees in the lane. "She's going, Jane, she's going," said Michael. "Quick," said Jane, "let us get the twins. They must see the last of her." She had no doubt, nor had Michael, that Mary Poppins had gone for good because the wind had changed. They each seized a twin and rushed to the window. Mary was now in the upper air now, floating away over the cherry trees and the roofs of the houses, holding tightly to the umbrella with one hand and the carpet bag with the other. The twins began to cry quietly. With their free hands, Jane and Michael opened the window and made one last effort to stay Mary Poppins' flight. "Mary Poppins!" they cried. "Mary Poppins, come back!" But she either didn't hear or deliberately took no notice, for she went on sailing up into the cloudy, whistling air, till at last she was wafted away over the hill, and the children couldn't see anything but trees bending and moaning under the wild west wind. She did what she said she would anyway. She stayed till the wind changed, said Jane. She sighed and turned away sadly from the window. She took John to his cot and put him back in. Michael said nothing. As he brought Barbara back and tucked her into bed as well, he was sniffing uncomfortably. "I wonder," said Jane, "if we'll ever see her again." Suddenly they heard voices on the stairs. "Children, children," said Mrs. Banks as she called to the open door. "Children, I'm very cross. Mary Poppins just left us." "Yes," said Jane and Michael. "You knew about it then," said Mrs. Banks, rather surprised. "Did she tell you she was going?" They shook their heads as Mrs. Banks went on. "It's outrageous. 1 minute here and gone the next. Not even an apology. Simply said I'm going, and then off she went. Anything more preposterous, more thoughtless, more discourteous. What is it, Michael?" she said. She broke off crossly, for Michael had grasped her skirt in his hand and was shaking her. "What is it, child? Did she say she'd ever come back?" He nearly knocked his mother over. "Please, Mom, tell me. Did she?" "You will not behave like this, Michael," she said, loosening the hold. "I don't remember what she said, except that she was going. But I certainly shouldn't have her back if she does want to come, leaving me high and dry with nobody to help and without a word of notice." "Oh, Mother," said Jane. "You're a very cruel woman," said Michael, clenching his fist as though any minute he would have to strike her. "Children, I'm ashamed of you, really I am. To want back anybody who's treated your mother so horribly, I'm utterly shocked." Jane burst then into tears. "Mary Poppins, the only one I want in the world," Michael wailed and flung himself to the floor. "Really, children, really, I don't understand. Really, children, really, I don't understand. Do you be good, I beg of you. There's nobody to look after you after tonight. I have to go out for dinner, and it's Ellen's day off. I'll have to send Miss Brill up." And she kissed them absent-mindedly and went away with an anxious little line on her forehead. "Well, if I ever did! Her going away and leaving you poor children in the lurch like that," said Mrs. Brill a moment later, bustling in and setting to work on them. "A heart of stone, that's what she had, and no mistake, or my name's not Clara Brill. Always keeping to herself, too. Not even a lace handkerchief or a hat pin to remember her by. Get up, will you please, Master Michael?" Mrs. Brill went on, panting heavily. "How we stood her so long I don't know, with her airs and graces and all. What a lot of buttons, Miss Jane. Stand still now, and let me undress you. Master Michael. Plain she was, too. Nothing much to look at. Indeed, all things considered, I don't know that we won't be better off without her, after all. Now, Jane, where's your nightgown? Why, what's that under your pillow?" Miss Brill had drawn out a knobbly parcel. "What is it? Give it to me, give it," said Jane, trembling with excitement. And she took from it Mrs. Brill's hands very quickly. Michael came and stood near her and watched her undo the string and tear away the brown paper. Mrs. Brill, without waiting to see what emerged from the package, went to the twins. The last wrapping fell to the floor, and the thing that was in the parcel laid in Jane's hand. "It's her picture," she said in a whisper, looking closely at it. And it was. Inside a curly frame was a painting of Mary Poppins, and underneath was written, "Mary Poppins by Bert." "That's the Madman, he did it," said Michael, and he took it in his hand so that he could have a better look. Jane found suddenly there was a letter attached to the painting. She unfolded it carefully. It ran, "Dear Jane, Michael had the compass, so the picture is for you. Au revoir, Mary Poppins." She read it out loud till she came to the words she couldn't understand. "Mrs. Brill," she called, "what does au revoir mean?" "Au revoir, dearie," said Miss Brill from the next room. "Why, what does it mean? Let me see. I'm not up in the foreign tongues. Does it mean God bless you? No, I'm wrong. I think, Miss Jane, dear, it means to meet again." Jane and Michael looked at each other. Joy and understanding shone in their eyes. They knew what Mary Poppins meant. Michael gave a long sigh of relief. "That's all right," he said shakily. "She always does what she says she will," and he turned away. "Michael, are you crying?" said Jane. He twisted his head and tried to smile at her. "No, I'm not," he said. "It's only my eyes." She pushed him gently towards the bed, and as he got in, she slipped the portrait of Mary Poppins into his hand, hurriedly, in case she thought she'd regret it. "You have it tonight, darling," said Jane, and she tucked him in, just as Mary Poppins used to. And that's the end of our story. I hope you guys enjoyed our book, Mary Poppins. It's the first book. There's also other books. There's quite a few books in the series. So the next one is Mary Poppins Comes Back. Then there's Mary Poppins Opens the Door and Mary Poppins in the Park. So maybe we'll get to read those sometime in the future. I hope you guys enjoyed our book, and I've enjoyed reading with you guys. I hope you have an amazing summer, and we'll see you soon. Bye.